This is the Ethanol Report, the industry podcast from the Renewable Fuels Association since 2008. I'm Cindy Zimmerman. The Renewable Fuels Association recently held its annual membership meeting in Omaha, Nebraska, and Derek Piney, CEO of Western Plains Energy in Oakley, Kansas, was elected chairman. I'm speaking to Derek right now, and first of all, Derek, what I'd like you to do is just introduce yourself and tell us about your background in the ethanol industry.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. It is a huge honor for me to be elected as chairman of the board of directors for Renewable Fuels Association, and I'm super excited to get to serve what a great organization it is. I was born and raised in rural Kansas, and my first job out of college included working in an ethanol plant at a much larger facility, but one of the divisions was an ethanol plant. And then since that time, I've been a part of a startup of a new ethanol plant, was part of a group that was developing multiple plants in the Midwest. And then I actually worked abroad at an ethanol plant before getting the opportunity 12 years ago to come to Western Plains Energy, and have served as the CEO here at Western Plains Energy in Northwest Kansas since that time. My roots are in agriculture, growing up in rural America, and my entire career has been in and around biofuels, and has really shown me firsthand the economic impact that this industry has on rural America. The innovation, the opportunities, and the camaraderie in biofuels make it an extremely rewarding industry to work in, and something that I treasure every day. And as chairman, I want to help build on RFA's legacy as the leading national trade association for America's ethanol industry, driving growth in sustainable renewable fuels and bioproducts. And I'm especially encouraged by the fact that public support for ethanol is at an all-time high right now. With recent RFA polling, ethanol is at 67% with voters as being viewed favorably.
Well, it was just last week that RFA had its membership meeting and you were elected chairman, and then just a couple of days later, the governor of California signed a law finally making E15 legal in that state, which is a huge deal for the industry. Just how big of a deal is it that California will now allow the sale of E15?
Well, it's a really big deal for the industry, and we're super proud of the RFA and all the work that they've done. They've been at the table pushing for years, and then as the AB 30, the bill that finally passed, was pushed through the committees in the legislature, the RFA was right front and center helping with that. The bill passed with 100% unanimous consent in all committees, both chambers, and then Governor Newsom, as you mentioned, signed the bill late last week. And it's a big deal. It was the last state that didn't allow the sale of E15, and California is our largest gasoline market in the United States. So this will definitely add demand to the ethanol product that's sold to the fuel transportation sector, and it's a really important milestone. Our goal is with RFA is the number one priority has been E15 for year round for nationwide, and this is a big step. We'll put a lot of pressure, hopefully, on the U.S. Congress to be able to do something that California has done very clearly and actually pretty quickly once they got started on it.
And RFA has been preparing for this immediate sale. This allows immediate sales of E15, as I understand it, and RFA has been working on that for over at least the last month directly with retailers, right?
They have. Yeah, they've actually had boots on the ground out there in California working with the various stakeholders in the supply chain, helping educate and make sure that the day that ethanol becomes, or E15 becomes viable in California, which was last Thursday, I believe, that it can make an immediate impact and doesn't get hung up with lots of people trying to figure out what to do and how to do it. So yeah, for the last month or so, a lot of personal time have been spent by members of the RFA staff out there working boots on the ground, which is an incredible testament to the RFA staff and their commitment to the industry.
Well, as you said, it's nationwide, year-round. E15 is the top priority. How is RFA going to make its case to Congress to make that happen? And how are you working with other groups like the corn growers to make your case, to make this happen this year before the end of the year?
Yeah, I think the strategy is really to continue raising awareness and building on the coalitions we have as we look for that legislative vehicle for the nationwide Consumer and Fuel Retailer Choice Act. You know, working with congressional members, the key things to emphasize are one, there's a looming farm crisis with the immediate economic benefits to consumers from consistent E15 availability. We have this gigantic corn crop in front of us, and we have got to find more demand for that corn. And this it can be straight in something that congressional members can help solve for the farm community. We've also seen strong voter support. Again, 72% from the RFA polling, 72% support E15 of the voters that were polled, which is the highest level we've seen in that category. There's a new CBO score around allowing E15, which shows that it's $4 to $6 billion in federal budget savings from implementing E15 year round. We have broad support, as you kind of mentioned, from the ag and biofuels groups, but we also have strong support from retailer associations like NACS or NATSO, NACS, and Sigma, and even some of the large refining companies are on board and supportive generally of having E15. So there's this huge support from stakeholders, and then there's actually strong bipartisan support in both chambers in the U.S. Congress, including key leadership positions. So there's a lot of momentum. The key is we have to find that legislative vehicle to attach the E15 bill to get it through or get it over the hump.
Well, I know E15 is the big priority, but tied into that really is defending the renewable fuel standard and going forward as it is. RFA just made comments just last week again on the EPA proposal for small refinery exemption reallocations, reallocating those gallons that are being exempted by EPA. Can you talk about the comments that RFA made and how that's important when it comes to defending and keeping the RFS on track the way it is?
Sure, and maybe we'll back up just the one step before the specific small refinery exemptions is prior to that, the EPA came out with the renewable volume obligations for 2026 and 2027. And generally in those comments, as the RFA, we're generally supportive of in that case, what's called the Set 2 proposal, which also removes volumes obligations for E-RINs, which we think is really important. It's apples and oranges, and the volume obligations is really about liquid transportation fuels. And then in that, they also talked about small refinery exemptions, and we're generally supportive of what came out in that package. And then they also talked about feedstock, and there is a priority to use domestic feedstocks, but we also think Canada and Mexico being our neighbors, we should include them and be a little bit careful about excluding other feedstocks. Now, there's been a challenge with some feedstocks coming in that's feels like it's a little bit of a dumping situation. So outside of that, I think generally around the volume obligations, we're quite supportive. When we look at the SRE decision that came in late August and the supplemental proposal that came out in mid-September, I think the key goal or the key thing that we want to share is any gallons that are obligated has to be reallocated. For me personally, I struggle with the idea of we have an obligation and then we would waive those gallons and not replace those gallons. I'm not sure how you call that an obligation if we don't follow through with that. And I think that's the key to just maintaining the integrity of the renewable fuel standard. If you have an obligation, those gallons that are part of that obligation must be made up somehow. So, there's nothing wrong with truly small refineries getting exemptions for true disproportionate economic harm. But that isn't every refinery in the United States. And even the small ones, if they get an exemption, those gallons should be picked up by the remaining obligated parties.
Well, of course, another priority for the industry is global trade. And coming up later this month, we have the Global Ethanol Summit, which is co-sponsored by RFA. So we've had a lot of talk about trade this year in 2025 with what's been going on with the Trump administration and tariffs. But what are the trade opportunities and challenges that you see for the ethanol industry right now?
Well, I think it's first important to level set. 2024, we had a record amount of exports of U.S. ethanol going around the world, 1.9 billion gallons, which was, I think, 35% higher than the previous year. We've seen growth in countries like Canada, India, Colombia, the UK. But to really fully realize our global potential, we need Congress and the administration to address some key policy priorities. First, top of the list, and it's been a little bit in the news, is we must achieve tariff parity with Brazil and allow U.S. ethanol full participation in Brazil's RenovaBio program. We got to secure China purchases of U.S. ethanol under existing trade deals. We've got to remove barriers in the EU, India, and Mexico to help them achieve their blending goals. The U.S. ethanol has been a net exporter of ethanol since 2009. And RFA is actively engaged in global forums around the world, as well as other partners in the ag and biofuel space, working to support other countries to help them meet their goals. And the bottom line is there's no other industry in the biofuels industry in the world that's better positioned to help support these other countries, but it's critical that we have fair and free trade practices. And that's going to come down to Congress and the Trump administration helping make sure that those are in place and make it a fair and free trade system.
Well, and RFA just took part in a trade mission with the Secretary of Agriculture to the UK, right?
Yes, that's correct. And those have been happening for quite some time, and there's more scheduled coming up as well. In a lot of the key countries, again, it's about helping them figure out if they're not blending, how do they start blending in ethanol into their fuel? Or if they're already blending, how do they get to that next level? If they're at E5, how do they get to E10? Or if they're at E10, how do they get to E15 or E20? So it's a lot of working together, share past practices that we've learned here so that others don't have to, relearn everything the hard way.
Well, Derek, you've been in the ethanol industry, as you said, for a while, for about over 25 years. And what do you see as some of the greatest accomplishments of the industry so far, and how do you view the current state of the industry?
Great question. And without a doubt, the renewable fuel standard is the industry's greatest accomplishment, in my opinion, delivering economic benefits to the U.S. ag sector and strengthening our energy security, both by generating our own domestic energy and also by extending the finite fossil energy resources that our country is blessed with. We've also seen tremendous innovation and efficiency improvements like better enzymes, higher yields, lower natural gas usage, more sophisticated automation and control systems, and frankly, improved safety performance over the years. We're also, as we have already talked about, exporting U.S. ethanol all around the world to all types of countries, including developing countries and petroleum-rich countries as well. And recent wins, like we've talked about a moment ago, like the E15 approval in California, shows that our industry's ability to overcome challenges and drive progress. I always say whenever I talk to people, ethanol is good for consumers, it's good for the environment, and it's good for America. RFA polling shows that the public supports 67% of voters have a favorable view of ethanol, and 74% see renewable fuels as the key to energy independence. So, of course, we face challenges. We continue to face challenges like SREs, trade barriers, and and the ever elusive year-round E15. But our industry is cohesive and it's committed, and the people in the industry work tirelessly for farmers, consumers, and the communities we all call home. And for me, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I'm really optimistic about what the future has ahead for us over the next couple of years. I see more and more exports. I see more and more innovation and efficiency improvements in the U.S. Industry, and I think it's just an exciting time to be a part of the industry. I'm very fortunate and blessed to be in the position I am with the chairmanship of the RFA.
Yeah, no, we had, of course, you mentioned the RFS, and of course, that is the greatest accomplishment for the industry. Big, big anniversary for that this year, the 20th anniversary for the RFS, and definitely over the time you've been in the industry, over the time I've been in the industry, it's definitely grown despite all of its challenges.
As a growing up in rural uh, Kansas and rural America, I had the chance as the ethanol industry was starting to blossom, the dry grind ethanol industry, and I had the chance to go back and work in my hometown at an ethanol plant. And the thing that struck me the most the day I got there was just how much the town was, how much economic impact the construction of the plant was already having on the town. Every restaurant was full at lunchtime. The campgrounds were full. It just seemed alive, and it was striking to me the great difference that I seen from what I remembered the last few times prior to that I'd been in that town. So, you know, that's just the beginning, the construction, but that continues every day for the 200 or so ethanol plants in the U.S. It's a massive impact on the local economies that, well, I think oftentimes gets overlooked or misunderstood. But these ethanol plants are a strong engine for the rural communities, the rural counties across America.
Everything the RFS set out to accomplish, it has accomplished. It's done with that. It revitalized rural America and helped us be less dependent on foreign oil. It's done everything it was supposed to do.
And it hasn't been easy. It is a lot of, you know, scrapping along, trying to find ways and being creative and finding coalitions that maybe we didn't always have. And, it's amazing to me to see today that our relationship with the petroleum industry is much better than it's probably been, at least more than a couple years ago. It's always been a contentious relationship, and I think that's changing. And I think that's a testament to folks like the RFA and the other trade associations and ag associations finding a way to work together and recognizing we all need each other, and it's important that we recognize that and that we work together so that we can all have longevity and we can all prosper.
Well, speaking of longevity, let's talk about the future and low carbon fuels. We haven't really talked about that yet. Reducing the carbon intensity of transportation fuels and not really working with the petroleum industry on that.
Yeah, we didn't talk much about the low carbon side of things or the sustainability side of things, but you're exactly right. There's been a massive shift over the last handful of years that consumers are expecting and demanding sustainable products, and whatever that is, not just in the transportation fuel, but kind of across the spectrum. And ethanol is very fortunate, has this unique and great opportunity to decarbonize as much or more than most industries, and probably be able to do that quicker than a lot of other industries. And so consumers are demanding lower carbon intensity fuels, and that's not the word they use. It's typically they just want more sustainable products. Ethanol is a great opportunity to mix in with the gasoline to lower the carbon intensity of the product that the consumer gets. And I think that's an important role our industry can offer back to the petroleum industry. Is when you look at greenhouse gas emissions for the United States, transportation fuel is the sector with the largest amount of greenhouse gas emissions. That's where ethanol sits. And we have an obligation to try and push that down collectively with the rest of the transportation fuel sector to improve that for all consumers.
Well, and it seems like the one thing the RFS did not directly deliver on has really been the production of commercially viable cellulosic ethanol. But really lowering the carbon intensity of first generation biofuels, it seems like, is bringing them closer to really achieving the ultimate goal.
Yeah, and might add to that, recognize that every plant today is making cellulosic ethanol. We're all converting our fiber or our cellulose into ethanol today. It's it's not the plant that just brings in pure biomass and makes ethanol out of that. We've had those facilities work through the problems and are not operating today. But every plant today is converting a certain percent of their uh, fiber into ethanol, and that's making its way to the marketplace every day. It's just not the scope that maybe we all had dreamed of. We all thought it was going to be dedicated plants, and today it's just co-fermented, or it's just part of the fermentation process that we're all using today. The innovation with the enzymes and the yeast have made dramatic improvements in the plants, and that's one of them. How do you make cellulosic ethanol that we do today? It's because of the enzymes, and more innovations with the yeast will continue to improve that, and with the enzymes. I don't think that part of the process has found the end point yet. I think there's a lot of opportunity still there.
And that improved technology is also what's helping farmers produce more corn, and that's why we're looking at a record corn crop this year. And back to the beginning, using more E15 will help farmers find a home for all that corn, hopefully year round and nationwide, and now that huge market in California, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of us had thought California was not ever probably get it done, even though we all wanted it. And I tell you, I know a couple of people in the Renewable Fuels Association that just kept saying, "Yeah, we're going to do this," even though people were telling them, "Don't waste your time. It's not going to happen." And what a great outcome to get unanimous votes all the way through the process, and then have the governor sign off on it. And this is a big deal for our industry and a great, great accomplishment. And it tells you that not only the legislators in California want it, but clearly the consumers in California want it.
All right, thank you very much. That's Derek Piney, the new chairman of the Renewable Fuels Association's Board of Directors. And that's the Ethanol Report for this time. Thanks for listening.